Welcome to LexTalks, Legal Topics Simplified, your companion for exploring the fascinating world of law. Especially for you, our law students in India, today's deep dive is right into the heart of your legal system.
The Indian Constitution.
Oh, you know it. We've got articles, we've got excerpts, all ready to go. You've probably heard it's the longest written constitution in the world.
It is.
But that's just the tip of the iceberg.
It really is. The Indian Constitution is a fascinating document. It's not just lengthy.
Yeah.
It's practically a patchwork quilt
Okay.
of inspiration from other constitutions around the world. Imagine the framers just sitting there sifting through the best ideas from different systems, trying to create something truly unique for India.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah.
What kind of sources do we have? What's our mission for this deep dive?
We've got some great resources here, pieces from academic journals, legal blogs. Our mission is to go beyond just listing features, right?
Yeah,
And really understand what makes the Indian Constitution tick.
I like it.
How did it come to be this unique blend of borrowed and original ideas? And how has it shaped India's journey as a nation?
That sounds like a plan. So what are some of the most striking things about the Indian Constitution that make it unique?
Well, first off, its sheer size. Remarkable. The Indian Constitution is the longest in the world. Over 448 articles.
Wow.
And 12 schedules. It's grown quite a bit from its original 395 articles.
Wow, that's a lot to digest. Why is it so much longer than other constitutions?
One reason is its comprehensiveness. The Indian Constitution doesn't just lay out fundamental rights. It provides specific directions for administrative bodies, even gives the public sector a constitutional position.
So it's not just about the big ideas. It gets into the nitty-gritty of how things should work.
Exactly. And this level of detail reflects the vastness and diversity of India. Think about it. You've got 28 states and 8 union territories,
Right.
each with its own unique challenges and cultural contexts. The Constitution had to account for all of that.
That makes sense. It's like a giant instruction manual
Right.
for running a massive and complex country.
Precisely. And as we mentioned, it draws inspiration from a variety of sources. Fascinating to see how the framers of the Indian Constitution cherry-picked features from other systems they admired.
Okay, let's get into specifics.
Sure.
What are some examples of these borrowed features?
Well, from the United States, India borrowed the concepts of fundamental rights, judicial independence, judicial review, even the process of presidential impeachment.
So those cornerstones of the American system found their way into the Indian Constitution.
Exactly. And the influence of the United Kingdom is also very strong. India adopted the British parliamentary system of government,
Okay.
the concept of single citizenship, and the principle of rule of law.
It seems like they were trying to build a system that would be both familiar
Yeah.
and progressive.
Yes. And don't forget the context. India was emerging from colonial rule. They wanted to establish a strong democratic foundation, but they also had to consider the realities of governing a newly independent nation.
So it's like they were trying to balance continuity with innovation.
Exactly.
What other countries contributed to this constitutional mix?
Australia's in there too. India borrowed the concept of a concurrent list, where both the central and state governments have power to legislate, and the idea of joint sittings of parliament houses.
Hold on. What exactly is a concurrent list?
Think of it as a shared space for lawmaking. Certain subjects like education, forests, criminal law, they fall under this list. Both the central government and the states can make laws on these matters.
Interesting. So it's not a strict separation of powers. There's some overlap, some room for collaboration between the center and the states.
Precisely. And this reflects the complex realities of a federal system. Some issues require a unified national approach, while others are better handled at the state level.
Okay, it's all starting to make sense. It's like they were creating the ultimate constitutional recipe,
Yeah.
taking the best ingredients
Yes.
from different systems.
Exactly.
What about those Soviet influences you mentioned?
Yes. Believe it or not, the concept of fundamental duties, which was added to the Indian Constitution later, was inspired by the Soviet Union. Also, the emphasis on social, economic, and political justice in the preamble has roots in Soviet ideology.
That's surprising. I wouldn't have guessed that the Indian Constitution drew from communist ideas. I'm curious, how did they reconcile those ideas with their commitment to democracy?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of what makes the Indian Constitution so fascinating. It's not a rigid or ideological document. It's a pragmatic blend of ideas adapted to the unique context of India.
So it's not about blindly copying other systems.
Right.
It's about picking and choosing the elements that resonate with India's needs
Mm-hmm.
and aspirations.
Absolutely.
What other sources were there?
Ireland had a significant influence as well. The directive principles of state policy, which guide the government towards social welfare, and the method for electing the president were inspired by the Irish Constitution.
So even a relatively small country like Ireland had something to offer this grand constitutional project.
Absolutely. Every system has its strengths, and the framers of the Indian Constitution were keen to learn from a variety of models.
It sounds like they cast a very wide net
They did.
in search of ideas.
Yeah. And one last example. The emergency provisions in the Indian Constitution, which allow for the suspension of fundamental rights during times of crisis, were inspired by the Weimar Constitution of Germany.
It's fascinating how they look at both successful and perhaps cautionary examples from history to guide their choices.
Exactly. They studied the successes and failures of other systems, trying to anticipate potential pitfalls, safeguard Indian democracy.
Okay, so we talked about the length, the borrowed features of the Indian Constitution. What about those aspects that are truly unique, setting it apart from any other constitution in the world? That's what I'm really eager to delve into.
There are several. For example, let's take a closer look at that quasi-federal structure we touched upon earlier. It's a key example of how the Indian Constitution adapts borrowed concepts to fit its own unique circumstances.
Sounds good. Let's dive deeper into that and see how it plays out in practice.
So, as we were saying, India's federal system, it's quite different from classic federal models like the United States. The central government has more power,
Okay.
particularly during emergencies.
So you're saying it's not a purely federal system. It leans towards a more centralized approach.
Exactly. It's a system designed to balance regional autonomy with the need for national unity.
Right.
Remember, India was a newly independent nation facing many challenges,
Sure.
including the trauma of partition.
Yeah.
The framers of the Constitution wanted to ensure stability, prevent fragmentation.
Makes sense, yeah. They needed a system that was both flexible and strong.
Right. And this balance is reflected in several other unique features of the Indian Constitution.
Okay.
Take, for example, the concept of single citizenship.
Okay, remind me how that works in a federal system with multiple states.
It means that every Indian citizen, regardless of which state they're from, holds only Indian citizenship.
Okay.
There's no separate state citizenship.
No.
This is in contrast to countries like the United States,
Yeah.
where you have both federal and state citizenship.
Okay.
So an Indian citizen living in Mumbai has the same rights and is treated the same as an Indian citizen living in Delhi or Chennai.
Got it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
This emphasis on single citizenship is a powerful symbol of national unity. It reinforces the idea that all Indians are equal members of one nation, despite the diversity of languages, cultures, and religions.
It's interesting how they use the Constitution to promote a sense of shared identity.
Right.
Are there other examples of this emphasis on unity?
Yes, the way the Constitution approaches fundamental rights is another key example.
Okay, tell me more about that. What's special about the fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution?
Well, first, they are very comprehensive. They cover a wide range of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights.
Okay.
And importantly, they're not just abstract ideals.
Right.
The Constitution provides mechanisms for their enforcement.
So these rights are meant to be real and tangible, not just words on paper.
Exactly, and one of the most powerful mechanisms for enforcement is the right to constitutional remedies.
Yeah.
This right allows any citizen to directly approach the Supreme Court if they feel their fundamental rights have been violated.
Wow, that's direct access to the highest court in the land.
It is. This right gives teeth to all the other fundamental rights, making them enforceable and ensuring they are not just empty promises.
That's impressive.
Right.
It seems like they really wanted to create a system where citizens could hold the government accountable.
Absolutely.
What about those fundamental duties you mentioned earlier? How do they fit into this picture?
The fundamental duties were added to the Constitution later, in 1976. While they are not legally enforceable, they serve as a reminder of citizens' responsibilities towards the nation.
So they're more like ethical guidelines.
Yes, they emphasize values like respecting the Constitution, upholding the sovereignty and integrity of India, promoting harmony, and valuing our heritage.
Okay.
Think of them as a counterpoint to the fundamental rights.
It sounds like they were trying to create a sense of balance between rights and duties, between individual freedom and collective responsibility.
Exactly. And this balance is a recurring theme in the Indian Constitution.
Gotcha.
Now, there's another interesting aspect related to rights and duties.
Okay.
The directive principles of state policy.
Okay, this is the first time we're hearing about these. What are the directive principles?
These principles, outlined in Part 4 of the Constitution, guide the government in creating policies for social and economic well-being.
Okay.
They aim to create a just and equitable society.
So they're kind of like aspirational goals.
You could say that.
Yeah.
They cover a wide range of goals, from providing adequate means of livelihood to promoting education and healthcare to ensuring equal justice and free legal aid.
These directive principles sound very ambitious. Are they legally enforceable, like the fundamental rights?
That's a key difference. The directive principles are not legally enforceable by courts. They are more like guidelines for the government to strive towards, not strict rules.
So it's up to the government to decide how and when to implement these principles.
Yes, and that's where the political process comes in. These principles are meant to be debated, prioritized, and implemented through legislation and policymaking.
So it's a delicate dance between ideals and realities.
It is, and this tension between ideals and realities is at the heart of constitutionalism in any country.
Right.
Speaking of ideals, the Indian Constitution also enshrines a very specific vision of the state, a secular state.
Let's talk about secularism.
Let's
It's a term that's often debated and interpreted in different ways.
Yeah.
How does the Indian Constitution define and approach secularism?
That's a great question. The Indian Constitution doesn't explicitly define secularism,
Okay.
but the concept is woven throughout the document.
Right.
It guarantees freedom of religion to all individuals and prohibits discrimination on religious grounds.
Yeah.
Importantly, it emphasizes the state's neutrality towards all religions.
So it's not about favoring one religion over another or promoting atheism. It's about creating a level playing field for all religions.
Exactly. It's a positive and inclusive approach to secularism, promoting respect and tolerance for religious diversity.
Okay.
This is especially relevant in a country as diverse as India.
It sounds like the framers of the Constitution were very aware of the need to manage religious diversity peacefully.
Absolutely. They recognized that religious freedom and harmony were essential for a strong and stable democracy, and this commitment to inclusivity is also reflected in the principle of universal adult franchise enshrined in the Constitution.
Universal adult franchise.
Yeah.
That means everyone has the right to vote.
Yes. Every Indian citizen over the age of 18 has the right to vote, regardless of their background, social status, or beliefs. It's a powerful statement about the equality of all citizens.
Wait, I thought the voting age in India was 21.
It was originally,
Okay.
but it was lowered to 18 in 1989 through a constitutional amendment.
So the Constitution is not set in stone.
Right.
It can evolve and adapt.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
The Indian Constitution is a living document capable of responding to new challenges. It's not just a historical artifact, it's a vital framework for India's present and future.
Okay.
Now, besides these broad principles, the Constitution also establishes specific institutions to ensure effective governance and accountability.
Okay, like what? What role do these institutions play?
Well, for instance, there are independent bodies like the Election Commission, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, and the Union and State Public Service Commissions.
I've heard those names, but what do they actually do? Can you break it down for me?
Of course, the Election Commission is responsible for conducting free and fair elections.
Oh.
The Comptroller and Auditor General of India audits government accounts, ensuring financial accountability.
Okay.
And the Public Service Commissions recruit civil servants, ensuring a competent bureaucracy.
So each of these institutions has a specific role to play in making sure the system functions properly.
Yes, and they are designed to be independent of political influence. They act as checks and balances, preventing any one branch of government from becoming too powerful and ensuring accountability to the people.
It sounds like a well-thought-out system, but what about those emergency provisions we discussed earlier? The ones that allow the government to suspend fundamental rights.
Those are a controversial part of the Constitution.
Okay.
While they are intended for exceptional circumstances like wars or insurrections,
Right.
they raise important questions about the balance of power and the potential for abuse.
It seems like there's always a tension between security and liberty.
There is, and that's why it's so important to understand the context and the potential consequences of these emergency provisions.
Okay.
Now let's shift gears and talk about another unique aspect of the Indian system,
Okay.
the three-tier government structure.
Three-tier. I thought we were already talking about the central government and the states.
Yeah,
What's the third tier?
that would be local government.
Okay.
The Indian Constitution originally had a two-tier system, but the 73rd and 74th Amendments in 1992 added the third tier of local self-governance, panchayats in rural areas and municipalities in urban areas.
So they brought democracy down to the grassroots level, empowering local communities.
Exactly. This was a major step towards decentralization, giving people a more direct voice in matters that affect their daily lives.
It's fascinating how the Constitution tries to balance power at different levels.
That's one of its key strengths.
Yeah.
It recognizes that good governance requires both a strong central authority and vibrant local institutions.
Yeah.
And there's one more interesting detail I want to share. The 97th Amendment in 2011 gave constitutional status to cooperative societies.
Cooperative societies. Why is that significant?
Cooperatives play a vital role in the Indian economy, particularly in rural areas.
Right.
By giving them constitutional status, the amendment recognized their importance and provided a framework for their functioning.
It sounds like the Constitution is very much a living document, evolving over time to address new challenges and realities.
It is, and as you continue your legal studies, you'll see how the Constitution is constantly being interpreted and reinterpreted by courts, shaping the legal and political landscape of India.
It really is fascinating, like weaving a tapestry. All these threads, history, culture, global influences, and this deep commitment to democracy and social justice.
It's a testament to the vision and wisdom of the framers. They created a framework that's lasted for over 70 years, guided India through so many challenges and transformations.
And it keeps evolving. Like, we've seen how amendments have been added to address new things, aspirations, lowering the voting age, or recognizing the role of cooperative
It's
societies.
exactly a living document,
Yeah.
adapting to the changing needs. It tries to balance individual rights with the needs of, well, such a diverse and evolving society.
Yeah.
A constant balancing act, right?
Yeah.
Between principles and pragmatism.
It's like a constant negotiation, a push and pull between unity and diversity.
Precisely. It's reflected in so many other aspects, from the distribution of legislative power to that interplay between fundamental rights and directive principles.
It seems like understanding the Indian Constitution is so much more than memorizing articles and amendments. It's about grasping these deeper tensions and contradictions, the ongoing debates about the best way to govern a complex and diverse nation.
Absolutely. The Indian Constitution is not a static text. It's a source of endless learning and debate. Keep questioning, keep exploring. Engage with this remarkable document. It's a journey that will enrich your understanding of law, politics, and society.
Thank you for listening to LexTalks. Follow, subscribe, and stay notified to never miss an episode.